ambushed them and killed his brother.
Smile for the camera.
It took me 10 whole years to track down these people for you.
I'm gonna kill them all. Smile for the camera.
Hello, welcome to our RecapPlus channel with me, Matthew. Today we will watch a recap movie Faster, released in 2010. This is a spoiler content video. So please turn on the subtitle and let's start the story. After being released from prison, Jimmy Cullen heads to a junkyard to meet his informant and retrieves his car along with a gun and some documents containing information about a man named Prescott Ashton. Using this information, he tracks down Prescott to his office and shoots him. Meanwhile, FBI agents Humphreys and Cicero start investigating the murder. Cullen meets his informant again and pays him for the car and gun, coercing him to reveal more names. At the same time, a hitman known as Killer is tasked by an anonymous caller to eliminate Cullen. At the FBI office, Detective Cicero discovers a videotape detailing Cullen's past. She explains to Humphreys that Cullen and his brother were involved in a bank robbery but were set up by someone. When threatened by other criminals, Cullen's brother, Gary, refused to give up information about the stolen money, leading to his brutal murder. Cullen himself was shot but miraculously survived thanks to a metallic plate implanted in his skull. Believing Cullen is seeking revenge for his brother's death, Cicero continues her explanation to Humphreys as Cullen goes after his next target, Kenneth Tyson, whom he shoots just before Tyson attempts to record an abducted girl. Exiting the apartment, Cullen encounters Killer, who has been monitoring him. A gunfight ensues, but Cullen manages to escape, leaving Killer furious. Meanwhile, Humphreys, at his girlfriend's house, faces criticism for neglecting his son. Cicero calls him to report Kenneth's murder, prompting Humphreys to rush to the crime scene. At the scene, Humphreys learns that Kenneth was involved in creating illicit videos and had intended to victimize the abducted girl. Cicero informs him that witnesses saw another shooter exchanging gunfire with Cullen but lacks further details. After his failed attempt to kill Cullen, Killer confides in his girlfriend, Lily, expressing his determination to succeed. Lily reassures him and accepts his proposal to marry. The next day at the FBI office, Cicero notices scars on Humphreys' arms and inquires about drug issues. Humphreys initially avoids the question but eventually admits to past drug use, claiming to have quit after his son's birth. Meanwhile, Cullen visits his ex-girlfriend Nan Porterman, only to discover she has moved on and started a family. He learns she aborted their unborn child after he prevented her from visiting him in prison. Saddened by the news, he leaves but is encouraged by Nan's support and urged to pursue his revenge. On the other hand, Killer marries Lily, expressing a desire to leave his criminal life behind and start anew with her. On the contrary, Cullen sets his sights on his next target, Nixon. Spotting him as he enters a club, memories of his brother's murder flood Cullen's mind. Following Nixon to the bathroom, Cullen realizes that Nixon was expecting him. Despite Nixon's readiness to face his fate, a brawl ensues, during which Cullen stabs Nixon before he manages to escape. Outside the club, Cullen calls Nixon's son to inform him of his father's actions. Meanwhile, Killer, despite his decision to quit his line of work, finds himself drawn back to his unfinished task of eliminating Cullen. Lily tries to dissuade him, fearing for his safety, but Killer remains resolute and departs anyway. The next day, both Killer and Humphreys prepare for their respective endeavors. Humphreys contacts Cicero to report the stabbing incident, suspecting Cullen's involvement. Though Cicero is skeptical, Humphreys vows to investigate the crime scene for any connections to Cullen's previous shootings. Learning that Nixon has survived and is hospitalized, Cullen recalls the brutality Nixon inflicted upon his brother and resolves to finish him off. Humphreys, anticipating Cullen's move, also visits the hospital to monitor Nixon. When Cullen arrives and shoots Nixon during surgery, Humphreys gives chase, eventually confronting Cullen in the basement. After a brief exchange of gunfire, Cullen spares Humphreys upon seeing his police badge and flees. While on the phone with Nixon's son, who seeks retribution for his father's death, Cullen admits to the killing and encourages him to pursue what he believes is just. As Cullen is pursued by Killer, their confrontation escalates into a high-speed car chase, culminating in Cullen disabling Killer's vehicle before being shot in the neck. Escaping once more, Cullen's survival infuriates Killer, who resolves to eliminate him by any means necessary. Returning home, Cullen confronts his mother at gunpoint, seeking answers about his father's involvement in their past troubles. His mother reveals that his father had died before the incident, absolving him of any guilt. Cullen recounts his initial reluctance to participate in the bank robbery orchestrated by his brother Gary but ultimately volunteered when their driver backed out. Despite Gary's care for him, Cullen tragically lost his brother in the ill-fated scheme. While reflecting on family photos, Cullen's gaze falls upon Maria, Gary's former girlfriend, and he discovers that it was she, not his father, who betrayed them. Fueled by anger, he grabs Gary's ashes and resolves to confront her. As he leaves the house, he overhears sermons about morality, while Humphreys returns to his office where he receives praise for his proximity to Cullen at the hospital. Cicero informs him that the gang members involved in Gary's murder were minor criminals with no significant criminal history. Meanwhile, Cullen, left with only one target, Alexander Jared, begins his search. Upon tracking him down, Jared, now a Christian minister, recognizes Cullen. After the congregation disperses, Jared explains that he had been discussing Cullen in recent sermons and invites him for a walk. Jared reveals that he adopted a boy and shares his remorse for past actions. Despite being part of the gang, Jared claims he was unaware of the plan to kill Gary and expresses regret for his involvement. He shares how his time in prison transformed him, leading him to dedicate his life to redemption. Touched by Jared's sincerity, Cullen forgives him and urges him to return to his family. Later, as Cullen sits alone at the camp, Killer arrives with intentions to kill him. Meanwhile, Humphreys, having also arrived, informs Cicero of his pursuit and refusal to wait for backup due to the imminent danger. Inside, Killer discovers that Cullen has avenged his grievances but realizes there's one target remaining, the person who hired him to kill Cullen, unbeknownst to Cullen himself. As tensions rise between Cullen and Killer, Humphreys intervenes, aiming his gun at Killer. Threatened, Killer drops his weapon, prompting Humphreys to reveal himself as the final perpetrator in Gary's murder, unbeknownst to Cullen. In a shocking revelation, Killer discovers that Humphreys was the one who hired him to assassinate Cullen. He informs Killer that Cullen was unaware of his involvement, revealing that he had deduced this during their encounter at the hospital when he chose not to apprehend him. Humphreys discloses that Gary's girlfriend was his informant, providing him with details about the bank robbery. Despite Humphreys attempting to compensate Killer, he declines, feeling undeserving due to his failure to complete the task. He bids farewell, urging Humphreys not to contact him again, and contacts Lily to inform her of his return home following the completion of his assignment. Meanwhile, on her way to assist Humphreys, Detective Cicero uncovers his prior knowledge of Cullen's involvement in the case. She contacts her superior, only to learn that Humphreys had volunteered for the investigation himself. With a clean slate, Humphreys reaches out to Maria, expressing his readiness to start anew with her. Unexpectedly, Cullen appears and shoots him in the head, revealing that his metallic plate has saved him. The FBI team arrives at the scene to find Humphreys deceased, but Cicero chooses to conceal the truth about his involvement in the case. Cullen scatters Gary's ashes into the sea and drives off, while Jared begins a sermon on forgiveness. To watch more video like this, click on the videos on your screen, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below. And at last I will say stay safe and stay healthy. See you next videos.